Have you ever wondered how good people with solid values and strong morals, end up making terrible choices they never thought possible? How someone who always stood for truth and integrity suddenly finds themselves cutting corners, looking the other way, or worse. It's one of life's most troubling mysteries, isn't it? The transformation from honest to corrupt rarely happens overnight. Instead, it's a subtle psychological journey that unfolds so gradually, most people never even realize they're on it until it's too late. Think of dropping a frog into boiling water. It jumps out immediately, but place it in cool water and slowly turn up the heat. It never notices the danger until it can't escape. That's exactly how corruption takes hold of good people. One small compromise at a time, one justification after another, until the unthinkable becomes routine. And today, I'll show you exactly how this psychological transformation happens. And more importantly, how to recognize the warning signs before it's too late. Don't skip any part of this video, because by the end, you'll see ethical decision-making and moral psychology in a whole new light. And hey, if you resonate with what we're doing here, I'll just ask one simple, free favor: hit that subscribe button. It means the world to me. All right, let's dive into it. The first step on the path to corruption is something psychologists call moral licensing. And it's absolutely fascinating. You see, when we do something good, our brain actually gives us permission to be a little bad afterward. It's like our mind keeps an internal moral ledger. And once we build up enough good karma, we feel entitled to cash some in on questionable behavior. It's this weird psychological accounting where your brain says, hey, you donated to charity yesterday, so it's totally fine to fudge these numbers a bit today. The shocking truth is this: being a good person most of the time can actually make you more vulnerable to ethical compromises, not less. Aristotle once wrote, "Excellence is a habit, not an act." In other words, your character isn't defined by your occasional good deeds, but by your consistent choices, even when no one's watching. People who slide into corruption often start with small allowances, tiny exceptions to their own rules. The first time, it feels uncomfortable, maybe even a bit thrilling, but soon it becomes normalized. Research shows that once you cross a small ethical line, your brain literally recalibrates what it considers acceptable behavior, making slightly bigger violations feel reasonable the next time. I remember speaking with a former financial analyst named James. He started his career with impeccable ethics. He was the guy who questioned everything, double-checked numbers, and refused to cut corners under pressure. But one day, his team was celebrating a major client win, and his boss told him to expense a personal dinner as a business meal. "Just this once," he said. "After all, we've earned it." James felt uncomfortable, but rationalized it, thinking about all the unpaid overtime he'd put in. That small decision opened the door, and within 2 years, James was helping clients hide millions in questionable transactions. Each step so incrementally small, he barely noticed the transformation. So the next time you find yourself thinking, "I deserve this exception because I'm generally a good person," be very careful. That's exactly how the slippery slope begins. Remember this key psychological insight. Your brain is wired to justify small ethical breaches using your past good behavior as permission to do so. Recognizing this tendency is your first defense against it. Because, my friend, at the end of the day, corruption doesn't target bad people. It specifically preys on good people who believe they're immune to it. It's hard to imagine anything more powerful than the groups we belong to. They shape everything about us: our identities, our values, our perceptions of right and wrong. But here's a psychological truth most people never fully grasp. The same group dynamics that give us belonging and purpose can also lead good people straight into corruption, almost invisibly. And the research on this is absolutely mind-blowing. When placed in groups, even the most principled individuals will often conform to unethical behaviors, especially if they see others doing it, and especially if those others are authority figures. Solomon Asch's famous conformity experiments showed just how easily our perceptions can be distorted by group pressure. And when it comes to ethical choices, the effect is even more pronounced. It's almost as if our moral compass gets recalibrated by the people around us, rather than by our internal values. Influential psychologist Philip Zimbardo, who conducted the infamous Stanford prison experiment, concluded that situational forces often overwhelm individual character. In other words, the setting and social dynamics around you can transform your behavior more powerfully than your personal convictions. This explains why otherwise decent people, when dropped into corrupt environments, gradually become just like everyone else. I've seen this firsthand with my friend Sarah. She joined a sales team at a prestigious company, excited about their stated values of integrity and customer service. 6 months in, she noticed the top performers regularly overpromise clients on deadlines they knew couldn't be met. At first, she found it disturbing, but her manager casually explained, "That's just how things work here. If we told the truth about timelines, we'd lose half our business. Everyone does it." Soon, Sarah was doing the same thing and rationalizing it, just like everyone else. The most frightening part? When she told me about it later, she didn't even recognize how much her values had shifted. There's a powerful psychological concept at work here called normalization. When unethical behavior becomes standard practice around you, your brain literally rewires itself to view these actions as normal, reasonable, even necessary. Psychologists call this the normalization of deviance, where wrong becomes right simply because it's common. Think about that for a second. Your sense of right and wrong can be completely altered, not by careful reasoning, but simply by what everyone else is doing. Here's a powerful insight from Aristotle. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. The environment you choose shapes the person you become, almost invisibly. If you spend enough time in a system where cutting corners, looking the other way, or rationalizing small corruptions is normal, eventually those behaviors will feel normal to you too. So how do you protect yourself from this powerful force? First, recognize that no one is immune to group influence. The moment you think, "I'm different, I won't be affected," you've actually become more vulnerable. Second, deliberately seek out ethical anchors, people or principles outside your immediate environment that can provide clarity and perspective. And finally, remember this: discomfort with group behavior isn't weakness. It's often the last voice of your authentic values, fighting to be heard before they were completely silenced. When you feel that ethical discomfort, pay attention. It's your inner wisdom warning you that something important is at stake. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to justify almost any action when you believe you're one of the good guys? This is where we encounter one of the most dangerous psychological forces behind corruption: the moral self-image paradox. It's a fascinating contradiction. The stronger your belief in your own goodness, the more likely you are to make unethical choices. Sounds completely backward, doesn't it? But the research is clear. People who strongly identify as moral, upstanding citizens are often more vulnerable to corruption than those who acknowledge their flaws. Here's why. When your self-image is built around being a good person, your brain works overtime to protect that image, even when your actions contradict it. This creates a powerful form of self-deception, where you reframe objectively unethical actions as necessary, reasonable, or even noble. This mental gymnastics has a name. Psychologists call it moral disengagement, the process by which we convince ourselves that ethical standards don't apply to our particular situation. Albert Bandura, a pioneering psychologist, identified several techniques people use to morally disengage. Moral justification, convincing yourself the ends justify the means. Euphemistic labeling, renaming corruption as something benign. Advantageous comparison, pointing to worse behavior to make yours seem acceptable. I saw this play out with a colleague named Michael. He served on a nonprofit board and had always prided himself on his integrity and commitment to the cause. When the organization faced budget cuts, he began diverting funds from restricted donations to cover operational costs, strictly against donor agreements. When I questioned him, he didn't see himself as doing anything wrong. "The money is still helping people," he said. "It's just bureaucratic red tape I'm cutting through. Besides, the donors don't really understand what we need." You know what's most striking about this story? Michael never once questioned his self-image as an ethical person. Despite clearly violating trust, his certainty about his own goodness created a blind spot, one that made real self-reflection impossible. This phenomenon is called ethical fading, where the ethical dimensions of a decision literally disappear from our awareness, replaced by other considerations like efficiency, loyalty, or necessity. The great philosopher Socrates once warned, "Know thyself." Understanding your own capacity for self-deception is crucial, because once you stop questioning your motives, you become vulnerable to corruption. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most corrupt people don't see themselves as corrupt. They've simply mastered the art of justification. Their internal narrative transforms questionable choices into reasonable responses to unique circumstances. The moment you start thinking, "The normal rules don't apply to my situation," or "I'm doing this for a greater good," be very careful. These are the classic first steps toward corruption, disguised as noble intentions. So how do you guard against this powerful form of self-deception? First, accept that you're not immune to rationalization or ethical blind spots. The moment you recognize your capacity for self-deception, you've already strengthened your defenses against it. Second, seek out honest feedback from people who aren't afraid to challenge you. And finally, remember that true integrity isn't about maintaining an image of perfection. It's about remaining open to the possibility that you might be wrong. Corruption doesn't begin with malicious intent. It starts with certainty. Certainty about your own righteousness, and the gradual erosion of self-awareness that follows. The pressure of achievement and success. What a powerful force, right? In today's world, we're constantly bombarded with messages about winning at all costs, hitting targets, outperforming competitors, and proving your worth through results. But here's the dark psychological truth that rarely gets discussed. The intense pressure to succeed is one of the most reliable pathways from ethical behavior to corruption. And it happens so gradually, most people don't even realize the transformation until it's complete. Think about it. When faced with impossible expectations or aggressive goals, even the most principled people begin to feel like they have no choice. The research on goal setting is absolutely clear. When organizations or individuals set rigid, ambitious targets, without equal emphasis on how those goals should be achieved, they unintentionally create the perfect conditions for ethical compromises. Psychologists call this goal shielding, where the intense focus on achievement literally blocks out ethical considerations from your decision-making process. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, warned, "If one does not know to which port one is sailing, no wind is favorable." When success becomes the only measure of your worth, the means you use to achieve it become increasingly irrelevant. I saw this firsthand with a brilliant researcher named David. He started his career with impeccable scientific standards. Careful, methodical, verified work. But when funding pressures and publication demands intensified, he began cutting corners. First, it was minor tweaks to statistical analyses to highlight significant findings, then excluding inconvenient data points. Each step justified by the pressure to produce results by any means necessary. The most striking part of David's story? He didn't even see these as ethical compromises. He saw them as necessary adaptations to an impossible system. The pressure had completely reshaped his perception of right and wrong. This reveals something profound about human psychology. Under enough pressure, our moral reasoning doesn't just weaken, it transforms. We begin to see unethical behavior as necessary, even responsible. This distortion is called ethical fading, where the ethical dimensions of our decisions literally disappear from awareness. The ancient Greeks had a word for this, akrasia, a weakness of will, where pressure and fear override our better judgment, even when we know what's right. It's not that people don't know the difference between right and wrong. It's that, under intense pressure, that knowledge becomes increasingly irrelevant. So how do you protect yourself from this powerful psychological force? First, recognize that no achievement, no matter how important, is worth compromising your character. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." In other words, your integrity isn't just another goal. It's the foundation for everything else you hope to achieve. Second, be deeply suspicious of any thinking that suggests the ends justify the means. That's almost always the first step toward ethical compromise. And finally, remember this. Real success isn't just about what you achieve, but how you achieve it. The process matters just as much as the outcome, because ultimately, your achievements will fade. But your character, that's what endures. And the greatest irony? Those who compromise their ethics under pressure often discover that success without integrity feels hollow. A Pyrrhic victory that costs far more than it's worth. It's one of life's most remarkable transformations. The way power and authority can completely reshape someone's character. Isn't it fascinating how the same person who once criticized corruption, who promised to be different, slowly becomes exactly what they once despised? Once they gain position? This psychological shift is so common, it has its own name, the power paradox, where the very qualities that help you gain influence, empathy, social intelligence, fairness, are often eroded by the experience of power itself. And the research on this is absolutely stunning. Studies show that even small amounts of power can dramatically alter how your brain functions, reducing empathy, increasing risk-taking, and most importantly, creating a profound sense of entitlement. Dr. Dasher Keltner, a leading researcher on power, calls this the power paradox. The very skills that helped you rise are corroded by power once you have it. Neuroscience shows us why. When you step into authority, your brain gets flooded with dopamine, the same chemical involved in addiction. It creates a subtle but powerful reward system for dominant behavior, and slowly your ability to see things from others' perspectives starts to fade. Plato once wrote, "The measure of a man is what he does with power." But power itself makes that measurement increasingly difficult because it distorts your self-awareness. I witnessed this firsthand. A colleague of mine, Lisa, began her career as a passionate advocate for ethical leadership. She criticized executives who use company perks for personal gain, swore she'd never be like them. 3 years after her promotion to leadership, she was taking the corporate jet for quasi-personal trips, justifying luxury hotels as necessary, bending company rules to favor her inner circle. The most remarkable part? She genuinely didn't see any contradiction. To her, the entitlement felt natural. And this reveals something profound. Corruption rarely feels like corruption to the one experiencing it. Power creates its own reality distortion field. Where special treatment feels deserved, exceptions feel justified in the rules that apply to others. Somehow, they don't apply to you. Another mechanism at play is something called moral licensing. Leaders often, without realizing it, believe their good deeds or hard work entitle them to ethical shortcuts elsewhere. It's like internal accounting. I've earned this. I deserve a pass. So how do you stop power from corrupting your character? First, institutionalize accountability. Surround yourself with people who don't depend on your approval. Ancient Roman generals used to have a slave whisper in their ear during victory parades. Remember, you are mortal. Find your version of that voice. Second, practice regular perspective taking. Deliberately imagine how your decisions affect those with less power than you. And finally, remember, true authority comes from character, not position. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "It is in your power to withdraw yourself." The path of a true leader is constant vigilance against the seductive pull of entitlement. Ultimately, the greatest protection against corruption isn't rules. It's not watchdogs. It's personal. It's your own commitment to self-awareness, your willingness to be questioned, your courage to hold yourself to higher standards, especially when no one else does. Because in the end, good people don't become corrupt through grand betrayals. They change through a series of small surrenders, justifications, blind spots that gradually reshape them from the inside out, without them ever noticing. And thank you for being a meaningful part of this journey.